Hey there, Polyvagal patron. I'm trying something different. Want to do this through video, something I really haven't done before besides the live streams. By the way, live stream every last Saturday of the month. That starts at 9 a.m. Pacific time, last Saturday of the month. And let me know if you're interested in that. Let me know so I can anticipate how many people will be there. Because if no one shows up, I won't do it, and then I'll just put that time toward other things. So yeah, I have a question here from one of your fellow patrons that I'm going to provide some insight on. Hopefully I can hopefully have something valuable to add to this. If you are a patron, so feel free to message me with any questions you have. Make them as general as possible. That makes it easier for me to address. And yeah, here we go. This is from, again, I'm going to make up a name here. This is from Gertrude. Gertrude via Patreon. She says, "Man, am I glad I found your podcast. I'm just in the end of year one's episodes and love what you're doing. I reviewed your topics for the second year and did not see anything specific to parenting stepchildren and keeping them and myself up the ladder while competing with the different rules or lack thereof in the other parent's home." Yeah, this is not something I've really talked about ever, I don't think, is step parents and mixed families, I think is what it's called. So this is an opportunity for me to go into something different. I don't know how much insight I have on this. This is, I wouldn't say I have expertise in step parenting whatsoever. I've worked a lot with kids who have either single parents or a single parent with like a boyfriend or a girlfriend of the parent in the home. A lot of that, or partners of the biological parent that are kind of in and out, or the single parent that are kind of in and out. A lot of that, or dads or moms that are kind of in and out of the person's life, not really there in a stable way, foster children. So I have a lot of experience with that. Step parents in a mixed home where things are relatively stable, I don't know how much experience I have with that. I do have some thoughts that maybe can help out, but that's definitely not where my expertise lies in knowledge or, wow, what's the word? History. Experience. My goodness, wow. Okay, so she goes on to say, "I was also wondering if you have an episode or 20 about being a biological sole parent in a relationship, but my daughter's father abandoned her 2 years ago, who was raised, being a biological sole parent who was raised in a very traumatic environment, who is dedicated to breaking the trauma cycle with my daughter." I hope that all makes sense. It does, and I actually asked for more information from the person just to get more context of this situation. And even though this is a specific situation, I'm going to address this in more of a general way. These are my thoughts in general, not specific life advice, not therapy. This is not therapy. Does not establish a therapeutic relationship, just to be clear about that. But the additional context here is, I had written saying, "It sounds like you're living with stepchildren and their biological father, but you also have a daughter of your own who is also living with you and them. Your stepchildren split time between their bio mom and their bio father, but your bio daughter is with you full time." And she said, "Yeah, that's exactly it. My ex-husband abandoned his parental duties 2 years ago." So that's just more of the context. So she goes on to say in the original message, "I guess where my struggle lies is being a quote-unquote parent, but raising children that are 10 and 11 that do not model behaviors I believe they should. The two main concerns are they are very immature for their age, and their mom has done everything for them. Second is their laziness and lack of motivation to do anything other than what they are forced to do." So first off, a couple of my thoughts here. This is a tough age, 10 years old, 11 years old. It's a tough age. I don't know if any age is easy. But 10 and 11, I have a 12-year-old now. She just turned 12. It's a tough age. It is a trying age. It's a challenging age. There's this impulse to individuate, potentially, to already start to individuate, push their parents away, to say, yeah, I know this and I know that, and I can do this on my own, even though they don't do it. And I know what to do this, even though they don't follow through and actually do it. You have to keep reminding them. So all these things in general, tough age. Now you compound that with step parents, step siblings, family turmoil, if there is any. And I don't. This is more general. You compound that with these issues, plus maybe the way they were raised. If there's a history of trauma, this person says bio mom does everything for them. So you filter or mix that in as well. It compounds. It's a big issue that kind of compounds on itself and becomes more complex. Besides, I mean, if life was perfect and you just had a 10 and 11-year-old that were like your biological children that you had raised since birth, it's still a complicated age. It's still a challenging age. And we have to keep ourselves in check as parents because it's going to trigger our own stuff, right? And you probably know that if you're a parent with this age group, you probably know that already. So they're individuating. This is supposed to happen. Rebellion is common. It's kind of supposed to happen, especially when you have parents that are more overly controlling, that want things a certain way. That will be the battleground. These 10, 11, 12-year-olds, that will be the battleground. Is their goal in life is to prove to you that you don't have control, that they are an individual. And especially if you have a child who's in the more of a strong-willed kind of personality, their goal in life is to prove you do not have control over them. So again, like just the issue just kind of compounds and builds. But most kids in general, they don't do anything unless they're, I'll say, forced to. They won't do anything unless there's something in it for them, an allowance or access to privileges. And it's not because they're bad, it's just because they're kids. They don't really do things unless there's something in it for them, at least at home. I mean, my kids are wonderful outside of here. They're very giving. They're good friends. At home, unless there's something in it for them, they don't volunteer to do chores typically. They don't volunteer to clean up like a mess in the house. That's just because they're kids. And if you have kids that do that, hey, my hat's off to you. Write a book because you may have all the answers. But the kids don't typically volunteer to do things unless it benefits them. They just don't. When it comes to homework, they don't like homework. They're not excited about homework. They don't want to do homework. We want them to do homework. Cleaning the room. There's Legos all over my 5-year-old, almost 6, his bedroom right now. Like I've asked him numerous times. There's been no consequence. I haven't pushed the issue, but I said, hey, might be a good time to clean up your Legos on the floor. He goes in there with the intent to do it and gets distracted and just starts playing with Legos. But there's no consequence. It's not a fight I want to pick. It's not worth it in my opinion. So he's okay with the way it is. I have a problem. I'm not okay with the Legos on the floor in his room. If it was out in the common area, like the living room, kitchen, that's an issue. In his room, not as much. So these aren't things that he'll volunteer to do. Even though it's important to me, it's not important to him. He doesn't care. Doing homework is important to us, not for kids. Doing chores, that's important to us, not for kids. So I think when it comes to kids in general, and it's stepchildren as well, we have to realize that what's important to us may not be important to them. What motivates us may not motivate them. It's just not as important. Now you take that and combine it with maybe a strong-willed personality, combine it maybe with history of trauma, combine it with parental divorce, which in and of itself might be traumatic, plus all the stuff that comes before that. The issue just builds and builds and builds. So the issue is not just that they won't do the thing. The issue is all of the stuff put together, right? So I think it's just a framework to kind of keep in mind that there's this much larger issue or collection of issues that our children are going through, and not just their developmental milestone or where they should be at or where we'd like them to be at. Where they should be at, where we'd like them to be at, or where they actually are. Those are different things. Yeah, but basically they don't care about the stuff that we care about. Gertrude goes on to say, I've learned enough in my research and talking to therapists that their father has to drive the bus and I'm his co-pilot when it comes to his kids. We don't always see eye to eye, and parenting is most of our struggle. And that's going to be not just with step households, but if parents are not on the same page, that's going to be a huge issue. And even if the same page, like ideally we want parenting to be the least controlling, the least punitive, the least restrictive. Hopefully that makes sense. And we want to give children as much leeway as possible for them to make choices and fail at those choices. And then, in my opinion, and then parents step in and kind of redirect. So parenting, I think, is elastic. So ideally, we want parenting to look something like that, in my opinion. Even if parents are not on the same board, on the same page to that, maybe they're on the same page to something else along the parenting spectrum, from like free-range parenting, where the kids they can go out and do whatever they want, and that's probably misrepresentation of free-range parenting, sorry. Well, there's a lot more freedom, I'll put it that way. Toward the spectrum from that toward very authoritarian parenting, where parents have complete say-so all the time, lots of control, lots of demands. So somewhere in between there, even if the parents are not on the same page when it comes to the least restrictive or more freedom, if they're on the same page somewhere in the middle, that's better than not being on the same page, in my opinion. Now, if you're both on the same page when it comes to high restriction, high punishment, high control, that's not ideal in my opinion. But if you're on the same page, if there's an agreement point that can be made somewhere on the spectrum of parenting, like, to me, that's a heck of a lot better than not being on the same page and bickering, especially if you're bickering with each other about the right thing to do. To me, that's more of a problem than being on the same page, even if it's less than perfect. But otherwise, based on what Gertrude says here, I agree, and I don't have a whole lot more to add. That when it comes to biological children, stepchildren, step-parents, that the biological parent should be the one to drive things like consequences, structure. I think the step-parent, and I don't have anything wonderful to add here, I think the step-parent is the quote-unquote co-pilot. To me, this really depends on the level of attachment and family functioning, and maybe that step parent can take on more of an active role. I've seen that. That's not a big deal. But if the rules, I guess in my opinion, when it comes to step parents, that the attachment, the bond, kind of has to come first. Well, same thing with biological parents too, huh? But with step parents, I think that the connection is probably more important than the rules and whatnot. The rules should come from the biological parent while the step parent works on building a safe connection with the stepchildren, in my opinion. So being a co-pilot, sure, but you can also be a support for the biological parents' interventions. You can be a support to them, and I guess that kind of falls under the idea of co-piloting until there's more development, more solidification of the relationship or the role in the family, until there's more of a buy-in, and that comes through just healthy attachment and safety and whatnot. When you have that, then maybe the step parent can step up and be more of a rules, boundaries, structure, and enforcement kind of parent as well. Teens that I've worked with, they consistently say though that this is their biggest issue, is that there's I haven't worked with a whole lot of step parents. Usually it's a biological parent's partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other, that they're in the home or visiting the home, and while they're there, they're going way overboard as far as trying to enforce rules. They're yelling at the kids. They're trying to dole out consequences. They're not working on the structure. They're not working on the bonding. And they're prioritizing being the boss or being. And what my teen clients will say is that, like, they're not my parent, they're not my dad. Why are they attempting to kind of be the dominant one? Especially the biggest problem is when they especially override the biological parent, and that's like a personality kind of thing, or maybe that partner is in this like fight energy, and they feel this urge to dominate. Whatever the driving force is that this is a constant issue for my clients that I work with that are younger, that are teenage years or even younger, is that this other person's coming into the home and being highly disruptive and attempting to dominate or kind of be the boss, or they say, why are they trying to be my parent? But really, it's not about being a parent. Seems like it's more about gaining control of the home. So that I hear that a lot from my clients, is that they don't want the step parent or the significant other to step in or come in and attempt to assert what their values or their expectations onto the family unit, or especially onto the kid themselves. And this ends up building resentment. Like, it doesn't work. The attachment has to be there. The connection has to be there before attempting to assert our values onto these children as step parent, or not, I'm not a step parent. Before a step parent or anybody attempts to assert their values, there really has to be, I think, a more of a healthy connection. And then from that, values can be shared and discussed and not necessarily imposed. I think the biological parent probably will do more of that kind of stuff where there's an imposition of rules and boundaries and like, look, this is just the way our home looks. Like that's probably more of a biological parent thing. But also the step parent can be a mentor. They can be a role model, and that can help build attachment and connection is being that safe person, that predictable person that acts as I don't want to say friend. I don't think friend's the right word, but more of a mentor, like an adult mentor, and just someone who sets an example of behavior, whatever that looks like in the family. Someone who is approachable without imposing. I think that's probably not a first step, but that would be maybe a milestone of just building a connection with a child that's not biologically yours, that you haven't raised, and you're coming into the home. That might be like a benchmark or a milestone if you can go from just being a safe person, working on connection building, and then becoming more of a mentor or example. And then the biological parent is more of that enforcer, pilot, structure kind of person. I think that could be a good initial balance. Gertrude goes on to say they are not used to having things made for them or time spent on them, so they don't know how to be grateful. I'm a crafty person and made totes for them for their summer shuffle off to school to take things between homes since they don't have backpacks. They took them to their moms the first day and we never saw them again. Oh, that's sad. I listened to your show about not taking it personally, and that helped some, but I feel like they are so ungrateful. I want to be the role model and oh, there you go. I want to be the role model and quote-unquote mother figure I know they need and deserve. I just don't know how to be patient with them, teach them, and not get so butthurt. His kids are a trigger for me, and I catch myself being irritated with them just because I expect them to do something irritating. This is an interesting one. I think kids in general for parents can, I'll say it this way and then I'll refine it. Kids can be a trigger, but that's not exactly true. What's true is that we have things within us that can be triggered, that may get triggered through our children. The kids are just kids. They're not the trigger in and of themselves. There's stuff within us. We have our own issues. We have our own control issues, abandonment issues, trauma issues. We have our own stuff. And that can get triggered by external stuff, but it's not the thing's fault exactly, right? They're just kids. They're kids who have had their own lives so far, 10, 11 years worth of living, and it sounds like it has not been ideal. So they have their own triggers, they have their own stuff. We have our own triggers, we have our own stuff. And these things are going to clash. And step parents are going to be triggers for the kids, and the kids are going to be triggers for the step parents. So I think it would help in general to not blame other people for how we feel. In general, some people who attack us, some people who are overtly triggering to us, like they're encroaching on our space, they're outright attacking us, they're calling us names. Yeah, our feelings can be attributed to them, right? More or less. In general, I think especially when it comes to kids, they do things to assert themselves, they do things to prove we don't have control over them, and that's to be expected. So the issue is, are they triggering, or is my need to assert control triggering? And again, this is not about Gertrude, this is in general, because control is a constant issue that I see when I work with parents. Parents want to have control over the situation, right? So the issue is not the kids, the issue is my need for control. My need for control conflicts with maybe a stepchild or my own child that also wants to assert control. The issue is not my child, the issue is my need for control, right? So the sooner we let go of, and I know that's not the ideal way of just saying, well, let it go. But the sooner that we can soften that through our own self-regulation, the sooner that the kids, quote unquote, will not be a trigger. Also, a step-parent may not align with what the stepchild wants or needs or is ready for. So what we want out of the situation may not align with what they want or with what they need. I think that it's up for a parent to recognize where a kid's at and to attempt to meet them there. Now, parents can, of course, have higher expectations, set the bar higher. I think it's actually really important, and I would recommend parents do that. But at the same time, as we're doing that, we also have to realize and understand with empathy and with compassion that they're just not there. And it's not about us. It's not about the step parent. That's just where they're at. So the sooner we can meet them there But also, in my mind, it's like, well, I'll meet you there empathetically. I'm with you. I can connect with you, but I do expect better at the same time. I think those do not conflict. I think those go hand in hand. When it comes to attempting to make a connection with them, whether it be through making things for them or inviting them to cook with us or just wanting to play and go swimming together, when it comes to that, they just might not be ready for that kind of bonding or connection. I don't even know if these, not just these, but stepchildren in general, they may not have even had that with their own biological mom or dad or parent. So if they haven't even had that with them, being able to build that with a step parent is going to be a lot more difficult. If they don't have a history of co-regulation, of safe connection and attachment, building that with someone brand new, especially while all these dynamics are going on, it just may not be, it might be too much of an ask or of an expectation. So can you expect that someday that'll happen and do the best you can to make it happen? Sure. But at the same time, we also have to expect and realize and understand that right now, they're just not there. And that a healthy amount of space right now is a good idea. And then hopefully the amount of space that we can, like literal space or emotional space, will lessen as time goes on, hopefully. Gertrude goes on to say, I'm learning that my lack of patience and my need for them to do more than bare minimum is causing all of us to run down the ladder. If I ask twice and have to ask a third time, I'm upset. The kids are not used to doing for themselves and are not used to asking for help. I have raised my daughter very differently, and although I know all kids are different, I feel they should be more advanced for their age. I'm talking basics like keeping their rooms clean, brushing their teeth, eating with utensils, and not their hands. So some of this is, some of the issue here, not just here, but in general, is that what we consider basic might be basic for us. For kids, it's not basic. Keeping a room clean for us, pretty basic. Clean house, clean apartment, pretty basic, right? We have pride in the things that we are paying for, that we own, or are renting, or whatever it is. Like, we have pride in that. It means something to us. It's our little habitat. We want it to feel safe. And part of that is keeping it clean. We want to feel that pride in there. Kids, not so much. They're not paying for this stuff. They don't really own it. They don't control it. They don't care in the same way that we do. So basic for us is different for them. Kids, when it comes to brushing your teeth, yeah, pretty darn basic, but for them, they don't care. So even though these things we consider basic, for them, it's not important. Watching TV is important. Playing with their friends, to them, that's important. They will go out of their way to make those things happen, right? Playing video games, being on a tablet, playing with Legos. These things are important to them. They will make these things happen because they're important. Brushing their teeth, it's just not. It's just not. Cleaning the room, it's just not. Now, there are things like that probably would be more basic, like fundamental to just existing in a society that, you know, I'm guessing Gertrude's society is like mine, where we use forks, we use utensils. So that may be considered, I think, pretty damn basic. Eating with your hands, probably less than ideal when it comes to spreading germs and whatnot. So that makes sense to me. Like, that probably should be a fundamental thing that's happening, is that we're using utensils to eat. We're not throwing food at each other. We're not eating off the floor. Stuff like that seems like, in general, pretty damn basic and a basic expectation for kids. If they're not doing these things, if they're wearing filthy clothes, they're drinking soda all day, like, to me, there is a concern there. I think kids will do those things. So a lot of this is just parental supervision, the parents being on the same page as far as what the expectations are for the kids. And at some point, it's like, I would start to be concerned about neglect. I mean, if a kid's drinking soda all day, wearing filthy clothes, if their hygiene's awful, but that's something different. That's on the parents. If the kids are not doing fundamental things like eating with a fork or a spoon, I'm like, well, why? Like, where did that come from? Did they not get these things growing up? And if that's the case, then it's really important that the two people involved, or one person, whoever it is the parent or parents are, that they communicate their expectation very clearly, but also enforce it during dinner time and model it as well, of course. But make it very clear that this is expected during mealtime. I mean, that seems pretty fundamental to me. But, choose your battles. Choose your battles. Not everything is as important. For me, the eating with a fork is pretty damn important. Keeping Legos off the floor, not so much. So what's considered basic for one home, for another home, it might not look the same. So choose your battles. For any parent, I would really recommend focus on what's important. Schoolwork, completing schoolwork, pretty damn important in my opinion. In our home, that's pretty important. Getting passing grades, pretty damn important. Do they need to be A's? No, you just have to pass the class. Doing homework, taking a shower or a bath every day, pretty important. Eating with utensils, I mean, bare bones, fundamental stuff that if it came down to it, these are things that my wife and I would be willing to go to battle for, quote unquote, go to battle for. These are things that are extremely important, that we have basic fundamental expectations. Keeping your room clean, it'd be nice, but we're not going to, for us, it's not a battle. For us, it's not something that we're going to pick a fight over. I think we just basic room maintenance is fine. But like I said, there's Legos on the floor right now. It bothers me. Generally, I don't care about it though. So choose your battles. Not everything is as important as the other thing, all right? If my kids wear polka dots up top and plaid down bottom, I think it's ugly, but I'm not going to pick up. It doesn't matter to us. It's not a huge issue that we're going to have to step in and, redirect. When it comes to these things that we're willing to pick battles about or not, talk about it with the other parent. The other parent and, both parents need to be on the same page, no matter what that looks like. And maybe in your household, it is really important that clothes match. I recommend not picking that battle. But if both of you agree that the way we present ourselves in public is important, to me, it's a lot better than two people disagreeing about that and then fighting about it and the kid manipulating it in some way, right? So talk to each other. You have to be on the same page. If you do have clear communication with each other about what the expectations are, you've talked to the kids about what the expectations are, then if they do break the expectation, now we have a platform where we can implement a consequence if that's the structure of your home. We could take away privilege or do a timeout or whatever it is based on the choices the child's making. And if in my home, and what I recommend for you is that if you're doing consequences, it should be pretty damn important. Like hitting, not doing schoolwork, not going to school. For us, swearing is one of those things. It better be pretty significant if you're going to implement a consequence. We wouldn't do a consequence for playing too loudly or even talking back to us. That's not something that we would do a consequence for. They can have their opinion. They can say no to us. But if they say, no, I'm not doing my homework, that's different. You know what I mean? But with my daughter, we expect her to say no to pretty much everything. Like, hey, it's time to do your chores. No. We just expect it's going to happen. But we also know that chores will get done. And if not, that's when we would do a consequence. Gertrude mentioned a lack of patience. I think it's something that every single one of us can identify with. And when we have that lack of patience, just recognize that there's some fight energy there. And there's a feeling of urgency or being rushed or pressured. That comes from at least a mild dysregulation. That comes from too much fight energy in the system. So that's where we have to, before we act on that rushed feeling, that pressure, we got to do some self-regulation first. Get that stuff in check before interacting with your kid. That's what I recommend. In check enough. It doesn't have to be perfectly, you don't have to be smiling, you don't have to be perfectly self-regulated, but self-control is a good idea. But self-regulated enough to feel that energy, but also come from a state of safety. Gertrude says, so here lies the big question. How do I stay in this relationship and stay safe and up the ladder? Now that's a whole separate issue beyond, like, if we had two parents that were on the same page. I think my thoughts here, and whatever research you've done as well, like, there's a comprehensive springboard here to get to the next step. But how do I stay in the relationship? That's a whole separate question, right? If someone asks me this kind of question, what I'm thinking of is the question, how do I stay in the relationship? Or is the question, should I stay in the relationship? And I can't tell you the answer to either of those things. It's really up to you and anybody else. If it's should I stay in the relationship? That's really something you have to be very honest with yourself about. I can't tell you that. But we have to be very honest with ourselves about the relationships we're in, friendships, marriages, whatever they are. And should I stay in this? That takes some brutal honesty. It's a tough question. Is it worth it? That's one thing you consider. Is the bad stuff, quote unquote bad stuff, Is the bad stuff something that you can live with or not? And if it is something, or if it's not something you can live with, how long can you put up with it? So if the bad stuff that we're involved in, and this isn't just about kids, this is like anything that you're involved in. If you can't stand it, how long can you live like that? I think it's pretty fundamental to it. Is if you can't stand it, if you can't be in this relationship, how long are you willing to put up with it? Because you're in it, right? So how long are you willing to put up with it? That's if the question is, should I stay in a relationship? If the question is how, I think the first step to that question, and to a lot of things in general, is to normalize some of what you're going through. And that might help soften the intensity of it. Like, normalize what you're going through. Normalize the context of what you're in. Like, normalize based on the past. Normalize based on what the kids need right now. Normalize means you just take the look at the context and make sense of it. Just saying, like, yeah, this makes sense. Normalize the fact that the feelings you have might be in conflict with what's needed in the moment, but the feelings you have come from its own context. So just normalize that stuff, and also validate it. This is how I feel. This is real. The feelings I have are real. They're happening right now, or they happened yesterday, or they will happen again. Just validate that you do have these feelings and they are real. So normalizing and validating, I think, can just kind of soften the intensity of whatever situation that we're in that need that. She goes on to say, I feel horrible for expecting more from the kids than they are used to, but I know they are capable. They just aren't held to a higher standard. The fact is, these are not my kids, and I have little control over the situation. I just like to not be anxious and keep myself, and ultimately them, down the ladder. I have had pretty bad anxiety over it for the last year or so. And I get where this is coming from, this kind of sentiment, but we should expect more. I think it is okay. It's necessary for us parents to expect more out of our kids, no matter what our relationship is with them. And maybe that's expecting better grades or better attendance or better connection with our kids. We should expect more out of them, and with ourselves as well. We should expect more of ourselves as parents. That doesn't mean that we're like beating ourselves up. That doesn't mean we're judging ourselves, judging them. It doesn't mean that we're going to yell at them for not living up to what we want out of them. No, it's just looking at where they're at and saying, just at least within ourselves, like, you did good within ourselves. I know you can do even better. And I'm going to challenge you to do so with lots of love and caring, because I want the best out of you. I think it's a really good message for teachers to have of their students as well, is you can do better. I mean, like, the moment that we accept that this is the best they can do, they'll feel that. And I think that's disastrous. I think they will live up or down to our expectations of them. Now, I know parents can say that they want better for their kids out loud, but internally they don't believe that. So we actually have to want better for our kids and believe it and feel it, and to feel and to know that they can do better. No matter what it is, they can make improvements in whatever that is. And even if they're achieving at a high level, I think it's okay to expect them and to want for them to try new things and to, build their zest for life and try new things out. That's not, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, if you're communicating to them like you're not doing good enough, do better, that's different. But like, hey, good job, proud of you, so proud of you for that, love you. What can we build on? What can we do next? Like, how can I support you on your next endeavor? That's a hell of a lot different than, you got an A-. Why didn't you get an A? Or like, you're not doing good enough. Do better. Why can't you be more like your sibling? Like, those are way different things. And hopefully that makes sense. But basically, I think it's always okay to expect more, to expect better, to hope for more, hope for better, while being supportive, while being loving, while being compassionate and empathetic. I think those go hand in hand, personally. And I think everybody in a child's life, I mentioned teachers, but everyone should be expecting this. We should all be expecting better of each other and communicating that to our kids, that you can do better. I expect it of you, and I'm here to help you. I'm here to support you along the way. So we can expect better for them while praising them for what they are accomplishing, and without pressuring them to do better, but just more of like being curious with them and about what else could be done. It's more of like a joining in curiosity and support. It could sound like, I believe in you. I know you can do better. I know you can achieve whatever you put your mind to. I expect you to succeed in school. I expect you to succeed in life. It might sound like that. And these are conversations I've had with my kids, and I'm pretty point blank about what I expect out of them in a very healthy way, in my opinion, in a very healthy way. So a couple more things she says. I'm in between counselors because of your bad therapy series. You helped me to solidify that the person I was with was not a good therapist and was definitely not right for me. I am working with someone in brain spotting to help heal my childhood traumas. I just started. Good for you. I'm glad the bad therapy series that I do and that Mercedes and I do was helpful for you and helped you to get to where, hopefully where you need to be, or at least closer to it. And she wraps up by saying, I think I just need a direction to go when the cause of my stress is out of my control. I know I can control my reactions and I know I can do better. You know what I would say to this is, when is the cause of our stress ever in our control? Right? Like if we controlled it, it probably wouldn't be stressful. When it comes to our kids, we do not control them. So if that's something that we're wrestling with, like, get acquainted with that idea right away. We do not control our kids. They do make their own choices, whether we like it or not. Good or bad, they do make their own choices. All we do is react to what they do. Hopefully we prepare them ahead of time. Hopefully we model. Hopefully we give them life lessons and all this stuff, right? Hopefully we build a healthy attachment. So there's a lot we can do, but ultimately our kids make their own choices and we react to those choices. We don't control them. We don't control our kids. Whether they're stepkids or not, we do not control them. So what do we have control over as parents? We control ourselves, more or less, but ultimately we have to take control. We have to take radical responsibility for our own choices, I believe. So what do we have control over? Ideally ourselves. And if it's not perfect, that's fine. We're going to work in that direction, okay? And we also have control over our attempts to communicate with the other parent that's involved. We can't control the outcome of that conversation, but we can definitely control how many attempts we make, or how passive we are in those attempts, or how assertive we are in those attempts. Those things we do have control over. Our behaviors, more or less, I would say we have control over those in some fact. I know it's a deeper conversation, but just for now, I think it's good enough to say we do have control over our behaviors. We don't control the outcome of our behaviors. That's just the way it is. But we do have control over what that looks like. In large part. I know it's not that simple, but in large part. So those are my thoughts on the situation, or on the situation in general. Those are my thoughts. I hope it was helpful for Gertrude here, but anyone listening, to you, dear listener, to you, dear patron, I hope this was helpful for you. If you have a question of your own, feel free to submit it. I love getting these questions because it kind of gets me to think differently or about things I don't typically talk about. So send me a question through DM if you like, or leave a comment in the description, not in the description, in the comments section of this video on Patreon. I would love to know what you thought about this. What else would you add? Like, what else would be helpful for Gertrude here? And was there anything that I got wrong? Again, this is not my expertise. So if I got something wrong, I would love to know what it is. But any resources, any thoughts you have about this, situations like this, please put them in the comments. And thank you for watching and or listening this whole time. Bye.